we should probably get into the questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
We've gotten some great ones. Again, thanks to everyone who's been submitting them. Keep them coming. We appreciate them. There's some really good stuff.
Yeah. So I guess the first one is, we're in a beautiful new construction building.
Yep.
What are questions that a buyer should be asking about new construction?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Truth is we probably sell more new construction than anything else. But as very experienced advisors, we love to sell things that are 1 to 5 years old, right? Because new construction comes with some risk. Nobody's ever lived in the property before. There are some inherent risks on how is it built, how is it going to weather, how is it going to settle. I'd say for me, first and foremost, the number one thing that I look at with new construction is who the developer was. We just spoke about how Belgravia, for example, has got a great reputation. They've done it for a very, very long time. They know what they're doing. They put out, great products time and time again. Now, we don't always, especially in a market like this, have the opportunity to work with a builder that we know.
Yeah.
So
how do you find, so I guess the question is, how do you find a builder, or how do you, because there's...
How do you vet a builder?
Well, how do you vet a builder, but also how do you find who the developer is? Because also right now what we're seeing is, even in our urban markets, a lot of like smaller buildings, right? Because most newer developers, they go for the smaller projects because it's building up.
For certain.
Then how do you...
Well, and there's two things to consider. The developer can be the builder, but the developer isn't always the builder. Sometimes you can have a developer and a builder, so you want to understand both their levels of experience. For me, if I'm not personally aware of them and their quality and stuff like that, I always start with asking for a list of their past projects. When I get a list of their past projects, I will reach out to every buyer's agent that represented the buyer on that past project. Ask how it was during the process, how were they in the year after when they were working through developer kinks, and is the client overall happy with the process and how things get. People are going to be very, very telling in that, because we have a lot of builders that are great to the finish line and then disappear afterwards. So I always want to hear from my colleagues, my peers, and have an understanding of how those people have been working in our market. So that's a big thing for me. I try and walk through other projects with them so that I can take clients through to say, hey, here's a project that they previously did, so that we can take a look at some of those things. What about you? What are some of the things that you're doing with new construction?
I don't know. It just depends on like what the new construction is.
Sure.
I actually haven't sold a ton of new construction. Like in my time, I've sold a handful. Some have been really good and some have been really bad. But I feel like you can always like kind of tell when it's going to also be bad. So like a couple years ago, I sold a new construction and I like walked in and we were like doing the inspection, and I literally told the client, I was like, I never tell clients not to purchase properties. Like that is their decision. I will give my honest feedback. And that was the one I was like, I would personally not buy this just because you can just tell the craftsmanship was not there.
Yeah.
Just even like within the house. And so...
And did they still buy it?
They still bought it. They didn't listen to me. And then 2 years after, they called me and they're like, that was a big mistake on our end, just because there was so much water damage because they used the wrong route in the tuck point.
Yeah.
And all of that.
So
it ended up being like a $40,000 fix.
Yeah.
From his unit specifically. And so it was just, it's a hard thing to do.
It is.
And because like I have another client who is like, they're literally $400,000 brand new construction within the last 2 years, and they're $400,000 and they're suing the developer based on it. And it's, again, not a very good reputable.
Yeah. No, you bring up a great point. I always joke and say that I'm known to talk clients out of buying and selling. It's kind of something that I tend to do. But the reality is it's always our client's decision at the end. I will absolutely tell somebody, hey, if it were me in your position with your priorities and your goals, I'm not comfortable with it. I guess I'm a little luckier that most of the time when I tell people that, they're like, morning, we're out of here. We're not going to play this game anymore from that perspective. But the reality is I do tell people is here's what I'm going to advise you on. Here's what I'm going to tell you. But then I'm going to step back and let you make the decision that is your decision to make.
Yeah.
And I won't say I told you so.
I didn't say I told you so. I swear to God, I was like, okay, how do we get this fixed? How do we resolve
that's all you
it?
can.
Like, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, but now going forward, you're like, all right, this actually does happen.
For certain.
There's a lot of bad new construction out there too.
Yeah, the other thing that I think is kind of mentioning that whole developer versus builder, there's a lot of different relationships in there. So for example, in the last year, I saw one where the developer was a little bit on the greener, newer side, but the builder was really, really well experienced. So it was one of those things that I had to explain to a client that the developer was a little greener, and so kind of what we might expect with that, but the person that was creating the product was tried and tested. So the route, the process there might have a couple kinks along the way, but I felt confident in that.
Yeah.
Because the reality is especially in our smaller markets, you know, we're not going to see Belgravia doing a single family home or a 3-unit building.
No.
We're not going to get a name like that.
Exactly.
When we do smaller projects, sometimes we have to get a little bit more creative in how we find confidence in that.
Yeah, totally.
I'd say the one other thing on that I think is kind of just important to note is a lot of times, especially if there's a builder that I like, or an agent, a developer that represents a builder and a developer, I will reach out to their agent and I'll say, hey, I know what you're marketing, but what else do you have coming now? Especially in this day and age with limited inventory, we've been doing a lot of this to say, hey, what other sites are you working on? What other projects? Sometimes we can get an inside scoop, especially if it's a builder and a developer that we like.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.